Dan Curtis here from Brighton and Hove Energy Services Co-op. Earlier this week for the BHESCo podcast, I had the privilege of interviewing Professor Benjamin Sovacool from the University of Sussex about his role with the IPCC Climate Change Report and what he thinks can be done to accelerate the move towards clean renewable energy and how that will benefit both people and planet alike. I found it a really fascinating and enjoyable talk. I certainly learned a lot, so I hope you enjoy it and I hope you learn a lot too. Let us know what you think in the comments and please subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Welcome to the BHESCo podcast. My name is Dan Curtis from Brighton and Hove Energy Services Co-op. Today I'm joined by Professor Benjamin Sovacool, Professor of Energy Policy at the Science Policy Research Unit at the University of Sussex Business School, and also Professor of Earth and Environment at Boston University, where he directs the Institute for Global Sustainability. His research focuses on renewable energy and energy efficiency, the politics of large-scale energy infrastructure, and designing public policy to improve energy security. Most recently, which is what we'll primarily be discussing today, Benjamin was nominated as coordinating lead author on the upcoming 7th IPCC assessment report. IPCC, of course, stands for Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and is the United Nations body responsible for assessing the science of climate change. Okay, so thank you for your time today, Benjamin. I think it's best to begin at the beginning. So if you could explain what exactly the IPCC report is all about and what you hope to achieve from contributing to it.
Yeah, the IPCC probably needs a new name. Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is hard to say, and my parents are still, they get it mixed up in what it stands for. And it was designed in 1992 as a kind of new way of integrating science on an important topic where the scientific evidence base keeps changing so rapidly. And so they have these different cycles, and each cycle can include side reports. They've done special reports on oceans or 1.5 degrees or way back in the day CCS, carbon capture and storage. But every cycle there's the kind of flagship report called the annual assessment. So the first one was the AR1, the second one was the AR2, and now we're all the way up to the AR7, which will be released in 2027. So
wow,
they
okay.
take a long time. They take 2 to 4 years to put together, and they only happen about every 6 to 10 years, give or take. And the idea that makes these reports special, I guess there's 4 distinctive attributes. Number one, they synthesize evidence. They don't create new evidence. They don't do new data collection. They don't run new interviews or create their own models. They simply synthesize the best scientific evidence. The second thing that they're supposed to do, which is a little more controversial, is they try to be policy relevant, but not policy prescriptive. The third thing they try to do is really balance perspectives from the global north and global south. So for every chapter, it's about a 50-50 split. And each chapter has 2 coordinating lead authors, of which I'm one. I represent the UK, and my colleague from the Global South is Nigeria. So again, you can already see a nice even split where we make sure it's not just dominated by scientists from North America or Europe. And lastly, it has become very interdisciplinary and multi-thematic. I think at the last assessment, the AR6, there were more than 100 disciplines, from anthropology to zoology, represented in the report. And they keep adding fascinating topics: equity, justice, sustainable development, and I was quite pleased to see acceleration was a really important topic. And for the first time ever at the AR6, they had one on behavior and demand, all by itself, rather than the usual sectoral chapters on transport or energy. So I think those 4 guiding attributes do make the IPCC report something special that don't really exist other than in this type of process.
Wow, I mean 100 disciplines is very impressive. I think the last one was in 2023?
2022.
Okay.
Yep.
That was the 6th.
That was the AR6.
Okay.
That's correct.
So my next question to you then was, what do you feel has changed in the intervening years, for better or for worse, and how do you think that will be reflected in the 7th report?
So the first shift is going to strike some people as odd, but when the IPCC reports began, it was only mitigation, climate mitigation, stopping emissions. And there was even a thought then that adaptation, which is building resilience to the impacts of climate change, shouldn't even be studied because it's morally repugnant. We should focus on stopping the problem.
Almost like giving up.
Yep, almost like giving up. As The Economist said, it was like farting at the dinner table to bring up adaptation. But the reports slowly started to shift so that now there's basically 3 core working groups. There is a working group 1, climate science. What do we know about the atmosphere, clouds, precipitation, ocean currents, sea levels? Working group 2 is adaptation. They did it. It is its own working group. Adaptation and resilience. Working group 3 is mitigation. So that's kind of been a stretch from beyond just starting with mitigation in climate science only. The other thing, which is maybe worse, is now the AR6 at least really relies on integrated assessment modeling, IAMs. And these models have gotten so sophisticated that they've even been critiqued, that the IPCC is too technocentric. It's too much about technology and price curves and diffusion, and not enough about culture, behavior, poverty, humans, practices, and so forth, including rebounds and protests and all the complex ways that we interact with the energy system. The AR7 is trying to go further. It is the first time that we will also see sub-themes that do deal with things like feminism and religion and spirituality. It's trying now to go beyond just the natural sciences, the economic behavioral sciences, and the social sciences, the arts and humanities. What role do they have to play? And lastly, the IPCC right now is in discussions about guidance for how we even include indigenous knowledge and citizen science, untraditional ways of collecting data, lived experiences data, that we've never done before. Because we want that to be reflected alongside the traditional Western notion of scientific articles.
I think the stories we tell each other are so important for motivating people to maybe do things that they otherwise wouldn't do. The 6th report, I believe, had a summary for policymakers, which I assume that the 7th will as well. I appreciate that it's a work in progress still, but what would be your key message to policymakers at a local or national level?
So the summary for policymakers is actually the most contested part of the IPCC, and it's actually not where I would go. If you really care about the IPCC, the way it works, the chapters themselves pass peer review. So the chapters are what's vetted for an extremely rigorous multi-cycle peer review process. And so there are like 3 rounds of peer review. There's a 0-order draft, a 1st-order draft, a 2nd-order draft. Our 2nd-order draft, I also helped the AR6. 2nd-order draft for just working group 3 on mitigation had 50,000 comments.
Wow, okay.
We have to respond to every single one.
Yeah.
So imagine shepherding a report through that. The chapters reflect what the scientists say matters, but the SPM is not that. The SPM is what governments censor and say is acceptable. So 2/3 of what's in the SPM draft is taken out. And so in a way, so what I'm getting at is if you really care about what the IPCC really says, the SPM is the watered down version. Go to the full reports, which have not been censored. But I can give you, I think, 3 high-level takeaway messages that I think really, really matter. The first one, climate action is a net positive co-benefit. In other words, it involves more benefits than costs. As I tell my students, climate action, decarbonization, low-carbon transitions are like a free lunch. You get paid to eat. We did a study that looked at 4 low-carbon transitions here in Europe, smart meters in Great Britain, solar photovoltaics in Germany, battery electric vehicles in Norway, nuclear power in France, which is contested and controversial. We identified 128 co-benefits beyond emissions reductions. Air pollution, resilience, jobs, energy security, competitiveness, innovation profiles, lower retail prices, better insulation from price volatility, and on and on and on and on. We also did another study that monetized just 2 co-benefits for the Nordic energy transition. So this is Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Finland, and Iceland, and found that if you just monetize fuel savings and avoided air pollution, it pays for itself.
Wow.
I didn't even mention the word climate change. We're not even counting climate change. So I think these are starting to kind of show that we think that climate action involves a cost, but in fact it's costlier not to act. And we're already paying. We're just paying with hospital admissions, degraded landscapes, and the whole host of externalities that plague energy systems. Second thing, also optimistic. Subnational actors and those that are seeking to reduce emissions outside of the UN system. So the UN system that started the IPCC is called the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. It's the one that has all of the COPs, consultation of the parties and the NDCs. So there's the whole like architecture of nation-state climate governance. That will achieve, let's say, this level of emissions reductions. What subnational actors are doing beyond nation states is even greater.
Wow,
so
okay.
the level of ambition that cities and corporations and cooperatives and civil society groups are actually reducing emissions already exceeds that by which we're doing through the nation state system, which is great news.
Yeah.
Because people can accelerate action tomorrow.
Without waiting.
Without waiting for these governments and without reversibility that happens with things like the United States or Syria, or Russia and others. And then lastly, I guess the final piece of big news is just technology-wise. I mean, the massive acceleration of solar photovoltaics and battery electric vehicles has far exceeded any of the projections. And so we have technologies that are rolling out and decarbonizing passenger mobility and electricity faster than we ever thought would be possible. That is legitimate good news. I think solar PV is already the biggest source of electricity, or it's set to be in 2030.
Globally?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've heard that.
Yeah. Which is fantastic. I mean, we were told 10 years ago it would never happen.
Okay.
They're energy additions, not transitions. There will always be coal and gas. No, we are actually seeing what needs to happen, which is not only decarbonization, but defossilization, getting fossil fuels out of the energy system.
So I had another question that I'll just jump to. Do you think that we have reached the tipping point with the price competitiveness of renewables? As in that they're just more economically attractive than fossil fuels. But what more could be done to reduce energy costs for UK bill payers?
Unfortunately, reducing costs may not be the best approach. And so some of the history of energy efficiency programs, demand management programs, finds that if you actually increase prices, like in the US you have these ridiculous things like descending block rate pricing, especially for industry. Industrial prices for electricity tend to be 30 or 40% lower than residential prices. And the way that you structure prices can have very negative effects on just energy waste. Counterintuitively, sometimes if you increase the price of electricity, you can still lower the cost for the consumer because they're using more efficient technologies.
Right, okay.
And so in that regard, electricity is already very subsidized. It already has prices that don't really match all of the externalities that we see. And so we also did another meta-survey of externalities in the global energy system and identified 12 trillion, with a T, $12 trillion worth of externalities, which if you were to price them would increase the price of energy by a factor of 3.
Okay.
But the good news for us, the 3 most socially costly sources of energy are coal, waste, and oil. And the best one, by the way, is energy efficiency demand response, geothermal, wind, and solar. And so the social benefits, I remember this, the benefits, solar PV and wind are 155 times fewer externalities than coal.
Yeah.
155.
Wow.
Right? Because think about asthma, mountaintop removal, coal mine spill, fly ash, all the hidden things. There's even radiation released in a lot of coal-fired power plants because there's small traces of cesium and uranium in coal. So I think it's like these hidden costs really create an unfair advantage for fossil fuels. So the fact that solar and wind can already compete in that unfair playing space with the low levelized cost is very advantageous, and they're modular. They have renewable fuels, they're decentralized, and they don't take as long to build. We did another assessment of construction cost overruns. It took us longer to fight World War II than it takes to build a nuclear power plant.
Well, yeah, of course. They haven't finished it.
That's right. Or the EPR in Finland, right, in Sweden. Whereas the average build time for a solar plant, if you can get the modules, is like a few months. Yeah. And wind and solar actually have underruns.
Getting it connected might be a different...
That's a different issue, but
you can build it quickly,
yeah. So I think it's these hidden advantages. Amory Lovins, you may have come across, has a wonderful book called "Small is Profitable." It's a homage to E.F. Schumacher, an economist in the 70s, who wrote a book called "Small is Beautiful."
Yes. Economics
as if people mattered. Great title. And Amory was paying homage to Schumacher in his Small is Profitable, and it lists more than 100 benefits to putting energy supply small scale, decentralized, grassroots from the bottom up at the level of neighborhoods, communities, and cooperatives.
Which perfectly leads into my next question. The BHESCo, of course, operate in the community energy sector, which plays, I think, a very important role in the net zero transition and bringing the public along with the journey towards net zero. What role do you see for community energy in the transition to net zero, and what more do you think policymakers could do to support the sector?
Well, I think there are a lot of valid policy tools that we knew were working, like a feed-in tariff for solar PV, that they canceled, for various reasons. And I hear there's a moratorium for onshore wind as well at the moment, or at least a de facto moratorium. And so I think there are like really financially successful and low carbon sources of electricity that are ready to go, that if we would just change policy, and you can also play around with power purchase agreements or the way that you can tax production tax credits and investment tax credits, although we did just find one of the most effective tools is a feed-in tariff, or a renewable portfolio standard is the other way of doing it. Both of them have been adopted by almost more than 100 countries, I think, around the world when you combine the two. I also think going the other way, so not only do you need incentives for renewable sources of supply, you need to adequately disincentivize fossil fuels, right? We're not paying the full social cost for them. And so that does mean taxing pollution, taxing PM 2.5, taxing NOx and SOx, nitrogen oxide, sulfur dioxide, having a better, maybe a more attuned price on carbon. Social cost on carbon is often the avoided cost, not the damage cost. The avoided cost is just what does it cost us not to emit it? It's like 20 euros. What is the ETS right now? 25 euros?
I don't know.
Me neither. Look it up. The European emissions trading scheme, the price of carbon has dropped to like $1 all the way up to like $50. It does oscillate quite a lot. But I think, those types of price signals do exist. And there's evidence that the social cost of carbon from how much damage it's causing could be $1,000 a ton. A single ton of CO2 could be up in the atmosphere for 10,000 years. It's longer than Stonehenge.
Wow.
It's longer than we've practiced Catholicism or agriculture.
I think it's the same amount of time that radioactive waste lasts from nuclear power.
And so I think every ton we put up there it has immense damage that we just pass off to the future. And so I think starting to grapple with that and coming up with a real way of capturing this. I mean, some economists at Harvard published a paper, a National Bureau of Economic Review paper like last year, that already found just using the avoided cost, climate change is a $3 or $4 trillion drain on economies. It's like fighting a permanent war every year in perpetuity. And you start to go to the damage cost, it could be 100 trillion. In fact, there was a study published.
I can't even comprehend that kind of
in
money.
Proceedings of the National Academies of Science, looking at sea level rise. This is just one climate impact, sea level rise and storm surge, and found that by 2100, end of the century, could be $100 trillion of damages. That wipes out all of our GDP, which is 102 trillion.
Okay.
And that's just one climate damage.
Yeah.
Right. So what we're playing with is the planet.
Yeah.
And I think, and we have to start pricing that into decisions we make today, and not discount them to the point where it shows up as something meaningless in our economic.
I suppose something that sometimes comes up with the idea of increasing the cost of fossil fuels, let's say for example gas, is that could potentially exacerbate already quite shocking levels of fuel poverty in the UK and other countries.
Yes, that's another thing actually, it's a recommendation for policymakers. Bring back a fuel poverty, energy poverty reduction program, like the Warmfront program, which was incredibly successful. Warmfront was like 2000 to 2012 or 13, lifted like 33 million UK homes out of fuel poverty, and we calculated a peer-reviewed piece, cost-benefit ratio of 30 to 1.
Wow.
For every pound put into Warmfront, it generated up to 30 pounds in fuel savings, improved comfort, improved health, property values, improved mental health. And also some colleagues of ours in the States have done a project looking at the co-benefits of weatherization, which is the term they use there for like helping insulate and draft-proof and put windows into low-income homes.
Okay.
They found more than 40 co-benefits,
wow,
of which health and mental health were some of the biggest. People just feel better, let alone fuel savings.
And then they'd be more productive in work, or more kind of motivated to find work if they're out of work, etc.
And something like a quarter of UK homes are currently in some form of energy poverty. And it's, you used to be the colonial leader of an empire, and now a quarter of your homes can't afford energy. People are riding the bus to stay warm, or taking, showering in a fast food restaurant sink because they can't afford anything else. And so it says a lot, this kind of privatized model of let's raise energy prices and have everyone pay doesn't really work. And in many other places, even within the Commonwealth, Malaysia has electricity for free.
Wow. Up
until a certain level. No one pays until you surpass like 100 or 200 kilowatt hours a month. And then it's tiered. The more you consume, the more you pay, and what the wealthy pay offsets what you pay.
The UK MP Clive Lewis suggested something like that a year or two ago, almost like progressive taxation, but applied to energy.
Progressive pricing. Right?
I thought it was a great idea.
It is a great idea.
I think Caroline Lucas seconded that, but it didn't go anywhere, unfortunately. But great idea.
Great idea, and it would at least ensure a minimum level of energy services for those who are in extreme fuel poverty or can't afford heat. We've also done studies that talk about complex energy poverty, which takes energy and mobility. And that's even worse because also, your mobility patterns consume a lot of fossil fuels. In fact, in terms of your carbon footprint, the two worst things that you can do are fly in an airplane or drive a car. Those are both transport related. Yeah. Food is third, heating is fourth. Right there, that's about 75% of a European household's carbon footprint, those four things. So when you combine that together, and a car and a house, over a long enough time period, you'll spend more on fuel than on the device. And so making those things more efficient and helping fight mobility and transport and energy poverty together also has a lot of benefits. And there are lots of communities that are vulnerable to both the infirm, the elderly, the disabled, or gypsies and travelers. Right. Those living in caravans.
Yeah. Okay.
We did interviews with gypsies and travelers and found that some of them spend up to 75% of their income on energy services and fuel.
But it's usually that portable gas canisters and stuff, isn't it? Yeah, and some of the fuel poverty services that BHESCo can access, we can get top-up vouchers for people on prepayment meters, or we can help people with debts to their energy company. But accessing those gas canisters is really difficult. It can be done, but it requires an inordinate amount of paperwork and effort to. Anyway, yes, they are certainly very marginalised and put down upon sector. So my very last question, because I appreciate time is precious. Of course, recently the United States announced its intention to withdraw from the IPCC, unfortunately. What impact do you expect that this will have on the scientists who participate in the report and the impact of the report ultimately?
Withdrew from the IPCC and 65 other international organizations, including the International Renewable Energy Agency. So it wasn't just the IPCC. I wish I could say it would have no impact, but it does, because no president has ever done this before, right? Even Trump before didn't do this, nor did Bush or Clinton or Obama, nor was it ever talked about. So there does seem to be this real antagonism towards science. He's also trying to close down NCAR, which is the National Center for Atmospheric Research, which does extreme weather monitoring, drought, severe storms, etc. So I think this is a shocking move, because it will undercut our ability to actually create resilience for everyone. Whether you're driving a car or flying in an airplane, all of us rely on either NCAR or IPCC data that helps calibrate extreme heat exposure or projections of temperature change, sea level rise, ocean acidification, and so forth. I think, bless the Americans that I know, they're still willing to work on the report and just not have an affiliation or pay out of pocket. So we're already giving our time for free. But these people care so much. Now they're willing to fund their trip to the meetings just to participate. There are also some good groups like the American Geophysical Union that are trying to pick up the tab to kind of raise money and just cover American scientists' involvement. That said, the IPCC is more than 100 countries, and something like less than 5% are United States. So the majority of it is still intact. And we still have all the other scientists from France, the UK, Canada, Mexico, Germany, and so forth. So their work will still be done. But the symbolism comes at a really interesting time. And it's even something that neither Russia, Iran, or Syria have done. Only the U.S. did this. Which I guess says more about the U.S. than about the IPCC.
Unfortunately so. Well, hopefully things will pick up, as you say, in the future. Well, I wish you all success with your report. Thank you for your time, Dr. Sovacool.
You're welcome.
I'll let you go on your way.
Thanks.
So there we are. I'm sure you'll agree that was a really fascinating discussion with Professor Sovacool, who I thought really eloquently made the case that the transition to renewable energy is in the benefit of everybody. So I really look forward to seeing what the IPCC report looks like when that comes out in 2027. I wish Professor Sovacool and his colleagues all the best of luck with their research, and thank him again for his time. If you want to find out more about BHESCo and our work, please subscribe to our channel, or of course take a look at our website at bhesco.co.uk.